we had one of the athletes like, hey, what training shoe should I get? And the first question I ask is like, what have you had in the past and what have you thought of it? So I try to assess like, what have you liked about the shoes you've used? And at the same time, what have you not liked about that same shoe? And just kind of get like the preference side of things down first. And then I also include just a little bit about like previous injury history. So if they're like, well, I tried this shoe and I really didn't like it because I wore that and I started getting foot pain. And so I kind of combine a lot of those things from a subjective standpoint and then go towards the shoe recommendation.
We got a great episode with Dr. Nathan Brown that really excited to share with you. Amongst other things, he's part of the Doctors of Running podcast, and there's a lot of shoe reviews, and he's got a lot of in-depth knowledge about this. And he and I chatted about his way of helping people find the right shoes, and I think it's a good perspective on that. You'll see why that's kind of ironic and punny when you listen to the episode here, but getting his perspective on how to help runners find the right pair of shoes, and I thought it was a good fresh take on that. So hope, amongst other things, we'll talk about that and go even into some cool inventions for the PT world and other things about what we should teach runners when they first get started with the sport. So enjoy the episode and thanks for listening. Hey everybody, Doug Adams here from RunDNA Podcast. Excited here to chat with a friend and colleague, Nathan Brown here. So Nathan, thanks for coming on, and really excited to have some fun, nerdy running conversations with you here. You're in the fellow PT hairstyle as me as well. I think a lot of people remark that a lot of our guests have that. That's not like a weird PT thing. It's just a circumstance, but great to have you on, and thanks for joining us here.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me on. It's always good to get to chat with you and learn from you.
Yeah, oh, likewise. So yeah, a little introduction for the audience. Nathan is lab director at Pinery's Running Lab. And what town is that in Wisconsin again?
It's in Amherst, Wisconsin, which is like a town of just over or right around 1,000 people. Very, very small town. And it's pretty close to Stevens Point, which is not necessarily a metropolis, but we've got about 25 to 30,000 people in the Point area. That's
bigger. Yeah. So that's not bad. And so Nathan's also clinical assistant professor at UW Stevens Point, and a senior. A lot of people might know Nathan actually from his work with the popular Doctors of Running podcast. He's a senior contributor there. It's a podcast I've been on and I listen to regularly, and I think they do a great job. I think you just did an episode with Kara Gatcher, right?
Yes,
I haven't listened to it yet, but I really want to listen to that one.
Yeah, it was fun to, I wasn't on that interview team, but it was fun to be able to connect with her and be able to hear her story. And she had that book coming out. So just obviously a lot going on there to learn.
Good time with that. Yeah, the runner dystonia and all that. It's very interesting. So, all right, we're going to do a couple rapid fire, just, first time audience, some of the audience meeting you here, just a couple quick questions just to get people to know you a little bit here. So, as somebody that's dedicated a lot of your career to working with runners, what do you love about working with runners? What makes you interested in this population?
Oh, there's a lot of things. I think over the last 2 to 4 years, most of the people that I've worked with have been a combination of kind of the recreational runner, locally competitive runner, however you want to classify yourself, but also kind of partnering with our high school cross country team and a little bit of the track team. And then now working at the university, I get to work with the university team. And I think what's so remarkable from everyone from those high school, middle school runners up to the kind of just like recreational runner, there's a similar like humility that a lot of runners like carry with them, where whether you are running a 5K in 35 minutes or you're running the 5K in 14 minutes, you both sides respect how much work goes into whatever that accomplishment is. And I think that there's this level of like, you just know it's hard for everyone because everyone is giving it what they have. So I'd love that mindset that runners carry into it. And they're just, kind of goofy too. You're going to have to like break down some barriers and like weird things that they hang on to as like, well, if I don't do that, then I'm not going to get better, even if it's actually detrimental. I kind of like those little things that we've decided to hold on to as important as runners, and just figuring out how to help people move forward towards what they want to do.
Runners, just great people all around. There's always exceptions to that, obviously, but I couldn't agree more about the sentiment about working with runners. They're so grateful too when you can help them,
Mhm.
because they really want to get back to running. It's a big part of their life, and they're really excited about that. So, all right, great. All right, now next question. So you're teaching more now. You're more in an academic, although still working with runners and doing gait analysis and those things. But what are you most excited now that you're around young professionals and having to stay up to date and making sure that the education matches both the current and the future state of the profession? Like, what are you most excited about for in the field of PT right now?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. This definitely expands beyond running for me.
Hmm.
So I'm currently getting my educational doctorate in educational sustainability. So a lot of my particular research focuses more on qualitative research and looking into like needs in rural communities,
Mm-hmm.
kind of where we live. But I think within that, I think something that I'm seeing within the landscape of research and kind of what is getting published and emphasized is a little bit more emphasis on kind of those detailed life experiences that people have, as we continue to realize that every decision that gets made when it comes to care and plan of care decisions, whatever, are end up being so individualized. So I like that we're trying to draw out some of these less quantifiable metrics within people's experiences with healthcare. Again, with my kind of research looking at healthcare, but also when it comes to running, you're starting to see how do people interact with shoes, for example, not only from a like running economy perspective or how it changes biomechanics, but also what is the perception of the person who's running and why they want to use that and how it interacts with them. So I kind of like how you know, there's this new avenue for research and understanding through a little bit more qualitative and trying to get those more squishy concepts to just be
Yeah.
talked about. And maybe we can identify more things that can be tested quantitatively later. But that's maybe I don't know how interesting that answer was, but that's kind of what I'm.
No, that is interesting because, you talk a lot of times even about like placebo effect or things like that, or like I've seen a quote many different ways from many different people that there's as many realities in this world as there are people, and what your perception is your reality, right? So we experience the world in different ways, and we can never really know what somebody else experiences in that capacity. But when you bring it back to shoes, even are these perceptions so rooted in so much data that we can't quantify on a finite level why somebody likes this pair of shoes or why somebody doesn't like this pair of shoes, but their perception is trusted, and we can be able to say, yeah, this actually really, like, if you feel, this is kind of getting to one of my later questions, we'll come back to this here, but when you're trying a pair of shoes on, you say like, this feels good, okay, that's probably a large percentage of what you should be choosing with your shoe there. So I think the perception of interventions, both equipment or healthcare, or even your perception of, is my training program working well or not, can really have a big impact on your performance and your abilities there. So very cool.
And I think one of the things that in one of your courses, I think it's the level 2 gait analysis certification course, you have kind of this matrix of factors that play into injury and all of that kind of stuff. And I feel like
Mm.
that's where it's very hard oftentimes to control for all of those different factors within one study. And so
Yeah.
having these kind of qualitative research kind of offshoots, which don't give you generalizable results, but can help you think about how can I think about somebody coming into the clinic, because this is what one person's experience is like and how all of these factors ended up interacting with each other. Yeah, so
It is so multifactorial, that it's really hard to say. Actually, here, let me see. Is this the one you were talking about? Like or this might be a different one actually,
it's a
but
little bit of a different one. I was thinking of this one where you had these lines between all these boxes.
oh yeah, that's in the endurance course, and that's
Oh,
the
okay.
like physiological performance, like what goes into like
Yes, that's the one.
running performance actually there. But yeah, whether you're thinking from a performance or from an injury standpoint, everything is just, you can't look at it from just one factor, right? I'm a huge running gait guy. I think running gait is like, that's kind of where I've drawn my line in the sand and said, listen, we all need to be doing gait analysis. We runners don't know what they're doing type thing. Like, it's an important thing, but that's one factor. right?
Right.
There's the mental factor, there's the physical factor of mobility, motor control, psychological stress, like it all interacts. And a lot of times the nice thing is you don't have to change everything. You just change one and a lot of the other stuff falls into place too.
Right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So, all right. I like it. We went already a little in depth just on the quick fire ones, but I like it. I like that stuff. So, all right. Here's another just quick fire one. What is the thing you wish you could create? Wave a magic wand, and you
Mhm.
can make any invention. And it will probably like put a little confines on this on like physical therapy or running related or so. Like, what would you do or create that would make a significant impact on the field?
Oh, feels like an impossible question.
Yeah.
You know, my mind goes to, and I don't think I have an answer of what this thing would be, but it would be
Yeah.
some sort of device that could temper. It's kind of like, you know how on your phone, it's like you've reached your screen limit, your screen
Yeah.
time limit for this thing.
Yeah.
I would love a device that could do that for our brains. Where like if we have someone that we're working with who deals with a lot of rumination on their pain or their injury, or they kind of become obsessive over like one part of their health that might not be helping them move forward.
Mm.
Like some kind of screen time limit on your brain. It's just like that's not really possible, but it would be somewhere
Well,
where we could have a little bit more
yeah.
interaction with like, or even a bell that would go off, be like, hey, this is an unhealthy thought pattern that you're going down, and you're
Yeah.
perpetuating some pathways in your brain that aren't leading to beneficial outcomes later. Um,
Hey, that's perfectly within the question. It's like wave a magic wand. It could be any intervention. It's like a pair of sunglasses or something that like interprets your brain waves and says like, all right, enough negative self-talk for the day. Like go like pat yourself in the back for a little bit or go do some meditation and get your mindset right there. I like that. Yeah, because I mean there is so much aspect of the physical manifestation of psychological thought and process there that if you could do that, you'd probably help a ton of people. I think that's a big part and an unrecognized part of what we do in physical therapy is hope. Showing people like get out of the self-talk, like you're not going to be injured forever, this isn't going to last this way.
yep.
Especially I find this with young runners that they're going through their first injury. It's funny, we were joking with one of my clinicians from a mega project the other day. He's about to turn 31, and he had his first ever like running injury that he had to miss more than like a day or two of running, and he had an existential crisis a little bit about it there. He's like, I didn't handle this very well, not being able to do it. And so your invention would definitely have helped him out at that point.
I think, and part of that comes into my brain just with Pineries, we do like run coaching as well, and I
Hmm.
think my coach when I was doing run coaching, who coached me, one of the things he always said to me was like, my job's just to help you get out of your own way.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of where I'm going with that. So that's where like the thought process came from, was in working with athletes, like how do we help them get out of their own way? And part of it's just like non-true stories that you repeat in your head about whatever it may be.
Yeah.
Be like, how do we rewire those stories to be true, not like false that are in.
Yeah, and that's a great point about what a coach does. I mean, you just described a brain coach versus a
Yeah.
running coach for your invention there. And it's true. And we've said this, I think, on other podcasts, even here. I look at like some of the top runners in the world that I work with, and I would say, well, why do you think they still have a coach? Because they need somebody outside of their head to be
Yeah.
able to tell them. Like we had Drew Hunter on. Drew's training me for a mile right now. I want to run a
Awesome.
sub 5 minute mile. I'm going to turn 40 soon. And every year in my 40s, I want to run a sub 5 minute mile, which is a little ambitious, but I'm
That's
going for it.
awesome.
And so he's training me, and I asked him that question. It's like, why do you have a coach? Like you're a coach, you're coaching other people. Like, why don't you just coach yourself and save a bunch of money on coaching fees? But they realize like, oh, I could never coach myself ever. And I don't know why runners think that they can get away with not having a coach.
Mm, yeah.
Like, why do we think that we're this like great all-knowing being that because we read a couple articles and follow a couple podcasts that we know what we're doing. And we really should be looking for having coaches. And even if it's just like a once a month review kind of thing, just to get you right. I mean, that makes all the difference in the world, I think. So
And I think a huge part of that is just somebody who's willing to look at your life, and we're talking about running, your running life
yeah,
right now, from an
yeah,
outside perspective that can maybe call out a couple things that may be less healthy than they could be. And,
yeah.
for some people, and it's like, should I get a running coach? I think we had a whole like Doctors of Running podcast on that question. And I think one of the things that I think about with that is like, I think that the best people to get a running coach are the people who've never ran before who want to start running.
Mhm.
Just get someone who just kind of walks you through the process for a while, helps you like think about all those myriads of factors that go into being healthy and creating sustainable running habits. Like that's like the perfect time. Put the
Yeah,
investment in up front, set yourself up for some success. Because I guess there is something fun about trying to figure out running on your own. Like I do think that's one of
yeah.
the fun things of running, but having some outside person, if it's a coach or if it's just a running friend who's like, yo, what are you doing, just somebody out there is a
Like an
good.
accountability partner, just
Yes,
to say like, "Hey, you have been upping your mileage for the last 6 weeks in a row by like 15 to 20%. Like, chill out, bro."
yes.
Yeah, yeah. That would be helpful at times. I think it's hard to realize that in the moment.
Yes.
Yeah. So speak like along those same lines, right? You came to running a little later in life, right? So this is a perfect kind of segue into this.
Yeah.
What have you learned as a professional? Like, what one lesson or two lessons would you have taught yourself if you could go back to that? You get started running, I think, in college,
Yeah.
and then dedicate your career to it. So, what would you teach yourself?
It's a great question. The first thing that came to my head is that I would want to kind of say to myself, like, run where you're at, not where you think you should be.
Mm.
Because
Yeah.
I was a, you know, multi-sport athlete in high school, and I had a competitive mindset and all this kind of stuff. And then, I saw one of my friends in college who was running, and I was like, well, I should be able to do that. But they had been
Yeah.
running through high school and did cross country, and I was not a cross country runner. I did soccer, which includes running, but it was soccer, wrestling, and tennis.
Mm.
And a lot of my early years were riddled with injuries, and I still have injuries now. I'm not immune to it just because I
Yeah.
running PT. But they were riddled with it because I tried to I would set running goals based on what I wanted to do, not actually where I was.
Yeah.
So it would kind of just be like, be honest with yourself, and like running's a slow burn, man. Like you can get better for decades. So be patient would maybe be the second thing, is like
Yeah.
figure out where you're at and just be patient with it. And like, don't push for things that don't need to happen right away, especially for someone like me who's not, I don't have this window of success for like making the Olympics. That is nowhere near what I'm doing, right?
You got
So
time.
I think that's kind of what I would tell myself.
That's great. I mean, I think running at your current ability, I think is a big error that I think a lot of people make. They think about, hey, I'm trying to train for a 5K and I want to run a sub 30-minute 5K, but their current fitness level is 35-minute 5K.
Yeah,
If you run at the pace of a 30-minute 5K right now, you're going to get injured.
right.
It's not your aspirational pace that you should train at. It's your current fitness level, which will build your pace. And then on race day, you can aspire to that new pace, but you can't aspire. And it's not to say that you should never run at target pace. I'm not saying that at all, but you should do fitness. And in that endurance coaching course, like that was one of our big things is
Totally.
test frequently. Make sure
Yeah.
you see where your fitness level actually is.
Yeah, with our athletes, we do the 2 mile endurance and the 2 mile time test to see, hey, where are you at now? I know you want to run a sub 2 hour half marathon, but that's in 20 weeks from now.
Yeah.
So don't start training at that effort now. Let's see where you're actually at. So
Yeah.
totally agree. Test
Yeah.
that's the PT coming out in the coaching, right? It's like
Yes.
it's like test retest. Like don't guess. Like test the thing and make sure that you know what you're going to be trying to implement.
Oh,
Um,
yeah.
make it
It
up.
it's so important there with that. And, to your second point about the patience, you have time. I also think that's a really important one. I heard this thought experiment. It's a little grim to go off on a little tangent here, but they say, it's if how old do you want to live to, right? And they would people will inevitably say something around 85 or so. Okay, well, if you're going to die at 85, what do you want to be like when you're 84? And
Mm,
everyone's like, oh, well, I want to be fit and I want to be with it and I want to be around family and I still want to travel and do those things. And it's like, okay, well, if you were that at 84, do you think you would die at 85? Right? Like, unless you were hit by a bus, what do you need to do? And if that's what you want to be at 84, what do you need to be doing today?
yeah.
Right. And like, this is not actually, this is one of my goals. I'm going to go for a run on my 100th birthday. That's my like athletic goal right now. So I have to think about now every day when I'm running, is this really contributing to my long-term goal of that? My long-term goal is to be a runner for life. So if I take an extra day of rest and even if I take a week rest, I've got about 2,000 weeks left in my life, right? So if I take 1 week of rest, but I can run the other 1,999,
You're
I'm
good.
doing something right there. So kind of perspective makes a big difference.
It's funny you say that goals. When I was so I was a gymnast growing up as well. That was
Hmm.
my main thing for most of my childhood. And then I had set these goals. I'm like, I'm gonna be able to do a backflip in my 50s still, and
Nice.
then I want to be able to do a handstand when I'm 70 still. Like I have a box jump when I'm in my 70s as well. So I have like those things as well that I've thought about. I'm like, I don't want to lose my backflip, so I just got to
Yeah.
keep doing backflips.
You can do a backflip now? I'm impressed.
Flip. It's not as good as it was.
Nice.
Because I've went from those like explosive sports to running. I've
Yeah.
lost my power. So I need to get my power back, but I can still do a backflip, like especially on like a trampoline for
Yeah.
sure. But I
Oh,
can still
wow.
on
I'm
ground.
impressed.
Um,
I can't even do that off a diving board, so I'm super impressed there. Yeah, that's very cool. Yeah, well, it's great. Sport specific, right? But keeping the long-term perspective and saying, "Hey, if I'm gonna do this, then" like, the reason I picked the mile goal is
mhm,
because I know that we start to lose speed at
mm,
this time of our life, and that in our 50s, it's a little bit more of a done deal, like, we really start to lose speed. So I was like, if I want to do anything fast and to force myself to stay in the weight room and do exercises and have some speed and have some explosiveness, my goal needs to be around fast running right now. I'll run marathons in my 50s then, right? I'm going to run miles in my 40s and I'll run marathons in my 50s when it's like okay to be slower there. So you have to set your goals to kind of be like, well, what am I going to force myself to do on a regular basis
yeah,
to maintain that health?
yeah.
So very cool. All right. So the other thing I want to talk about here too, Doctors of Running podcast, just great. I love it. I think you guys do a really great job. And talking about shoes is not the only topic, but a common topic that's talked on there. So can you share first? I'd be curious what your shoe choice or choices are, what you run in. And then when a client comes to you at Pinery's Running Lab, you're doing a Pinery's, by the way, if you're anywhere near Wisconsin, great facility. They're one of our 3D users. They do a great job with that. The coaching, the whole thing, you guys really do a great job with. So a little plug for you guys there because you do a
Appreciate that.
great job with it. But when one of your clients comes in, what do you tell them when they're picking out shoes?
Yeah. So for my own choices, I've got a few. I won't go into much of it now, but I tore my plantar plate on my left
Mm.
big MTP, so I
Ooh.
was out for like 30 weeks
Oh,
of really like being able to load it. So I'm finally back and I've been running. So
was
that
that
has
during a backflip that you tore it or
yeah,
no?
thankfully backflip. Um, no, but so that has limited the amount of recent shoes that I've been testing. But in my
Okay.
current lineup, the shoes that I'm getting the most miles on in are the Hoka Mach 6. Um, I won't go in. I won't bore people with the details, but it's kind of like a lighter weight trainer from Hoka. They finally put a rubber outsole, so it's going to last a lot longer
Mm.
than the previous models did. Slightly firmer, and it doesn't have like a ton of cush to it, which I appreciate for a lot of like easy miles. Just I'm a big preference guy when it comes to footwear, so my
Yeah.
preference leans towards the not super squishy soft. I can still feel the ground. So the Hoka Mach 6, and then for like longer efforts and some of the up tempo stuff, I've enjoyed the Endorphin Speed 4 from
Mm.
Saucony. So those have been
Yeah.
my two for like getting most of my miles in. But part of that has just been what's been comfortable on my foot because I still have like
Yeah.
residual symptoms. So if the cushioning's not right, it just feels uncomfortable. So those have been two. And then I recently ran a 5 mile race, not super fast, but I raced it in the ASICS Metaspeed Edge Paris. It was super fun.
Yeah.
I would probably pick it for something up to half marathon distance range
Yeah.
to be my racer.
All
Super
right.
rolls really well for me.
Nice. Is the Hoka Mach 6, is that a low heel drop too as
Yep,
well?
it's
Or
right around a 5 millimeter
5?
drop. Yep,
Okay.
yep.
So all those shoes are that your preference is in that, because the endorphin, what's the
Endorphin
endorphin?
is an 8.
It's an
Um,
8. So that one's a little
yeah,
higher, but
and
not
the
a
edge is a 5
12.
as
The edge
well.
is
I
5.
usually fall in that like 5 to 8 millimeter is
Yeah.
kind of the jam. I used to run in the Wave Rider from Mizuno. It's a 12 millimeter drop shoe,
Yeah.
and then I think just over time my mechanics have changed and it just doesn't work as well for me. Just kind of clunky in the heel.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah.
Nice. All right. So now when you tell somebody else to get shoes, how do you recommend people pick out their shoes?
Yeah. So it's going to obviously be super individual, but kind of some of the guiding principles in terms of how I approach the conversation, because we had it yesterday in the running lab that we lead with our students here when we're working
Mhm.
with SP athletes. We had one of the athletes like, hey, what training shoe should I get? And the first question I ask is like, what have you had in the past and what have you thought of it? So I try to assess like, what have you liked about the shoes you've used? And at the same time, what have you not liked about that same shoe? And kind of sometimes people don't know how to describe it. So I'll
Hmm.
start questions like, did you think it was too soft? Was it really firm? Did you like how flexible it was? Did it fit your foot well? I'll just kind of start probing and just kind of get like the preference side of things down first. And then
Hmm.
I also include just a little bit about like previous injury history. So if they're like, well, I tried this shoe and I really didn't like it because I wore that and I started getting foot pain after, a month of using it or a couple weeks of using it. Or if there's somebody who has like recurrent like plantar foot fascia pain or tib post pain or some other pronation related injury, there's some evidence to say that those people who have those recurrent injuries may benefit from a little bit more structure on the medial side of their shoe. It doesn't mean they need a stability shoe, but some kind of sole flaring or some kind of metric. So I look at, again, kind of their preference towards the shoes that they've used or the things they haven't liked. And then I combine in a little bit of injury history. And if they're, we do know some things about shoe types will change your
Hmm.
mechanics as well, which if you change your mechanics, that's going to change the loading on different structures. And so I kind of combine a lot of those things from a subjective standpoint and then go towards the shoe recommendation. There's been, when I have the time, which is not always, it's not always practical, but I have had people run in two different types of shoes and check out I think you do something similar where you
Hmm.
check out both mechanics and you see like, hey, when you're running in this shoe, you really, you're here for knee pain. When you do this, you reach further in front of your body. You have more time standing where your foot is in front of your center of mass. You have a higher tibial inclination, whatever it is.
Yeah.
Be leading to more stress on your knee. Whereas when you wear this other shoe, you land a lot closer underneath your body. So this might be a better option for you right now. So there are times where I incorporate the mechanical changes that happen with shoes, but I don't do that whole scale because they're not super predictable. Like it's
Right.
not like everyone who runs in a 30 millimeter stack height with zero drop is going to have this exact change in their mechanics. It just doesn't happen. So unless I can really make it specific by assessing it, I usually don't make my recommendations that way. So.
I like the preference aspect of that too. It's always answer a question with a question type thing.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
it's helpful, right? Like, what shoes should I buy? What shoes have you liked?
Yeah.
But that's good because if you are familiar with shoes, and that's something, if you're not, I would definitely recommend listening to Doctors of Running podcast because you'll get familiar with a lot of the shoes that are current. And but if you understand and you stay current with some of the shoes, you can understand. Oh, well, yeah, that shoe is a low drop, and it kind of like I was asking you a little bit, hey, is that a low? Oh, your preference is kind of you like 5 to 8 millimeters for a heel to toe drop. Okay, well, let's look on. You want to try a Brooks? Let's find one that's in that 5 to 8 range, or they don't have one. All right, let's go check out a Topo or somebody else that does. So having that understanding and understanding their preference, back to your research and what interests you in the field right now, that preference makes a big impact.
I should also, in terms of my favorite shoes, in terms of brand, Topo has been one of my favorites for me over the last couple years. I wear a pair every day for work right now.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think that they do anatomical shape toe boxes, and they have like that 0 to drop to mid-range drop of kind of like 5 millimeters, and they're just comfortable. They have a
Yeah.
really nice lockdown. I think they do a really nice job. They don't venture into like the super fancy technology, which is part of their ethos. Like that's who they are. So
Yeah. Please
I
stay that
appreciate.
way, Topo. Please. Yeah.
Yeah. From what I understand, there's no plans to add plates to anything anytime soon for them.
Great. So I've run in Topos for the past 8 years,
Oh,
and like that's a shoe I've been running in, and we started selling them at my clinic actually because
oh, nice.
we had so many people that we were recommending them to, and there was just nowhere around here. Like our idea isn't to be a running retail store, but our idea is that like we want to serve our clients better, and we were recommending the shoes so often that we just said, well, we'll just stock them so that people can feel the
Nice.
difference because it is easy. And it's a shoe I've run in the Flylight. I think I've had every version of the Flylight. I'm in the 5 now, and 5 actually I think has been my favorite of all of them. There, they've been really good, and I think I'm going to try the Magnafly. I've never run in it, but I think I'm going to try it out maybe this
The
weekend.
Magnafly 4 is the most comfortable upper I've ever had for any shoe ever.
Really? Okay.
The 5 is still okay, but it's not as good as the 4. So if you
I
can
just ordered
snag a 4, you should do it.
I just ordered the Magnafly 4 for my wife because she liked the color. And then I was going to try the 5, but maybe I'll order some 4s for myself too there.
I think the 4 is worth it. They didn't change too much.
All right.
But I loved the
But it was
4.
just so good there. Yeah. Well, that's cool. Like, and you find your preference with that, and I think helping other people find their preference, and because some brands do change more from year to year. I think that's where people feel almost a little betrayed by some shoe brands because it changes so much. They're like, I just want it. I always had an idea for a company where I would buy all the old shoe molds. And then you could order your favorite year of shoe and get it custom made for you. And it would cost more, but you could have, because the foam, you can't, like, one of the things I discourage people from doing is like they find a pair of shoes, and like if people are listening to this, don't go buy like 20 pairs of the Magnafly 4 right now, because by the time you get to use them, there is a shelf life to foam, and they're not going to be as good. Where if people do that, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this maybe, but my recommendation is if you're buying a shoe that's over a year out of model, I recommend people take about 20% off of their expected life of the shoe.
Yeah. I'm not an expert in material science, but I think in the conversations we've had with some of the material engineers, with some of the companies that we get to know through Doctors of Running, they've kind of mentioned some similar ideas where after, a year, it's still going to be in a pretty good shape. 2 years, you're starting to see some detriment in the resilience and the durability of that foam. And it's not so much the outsole that matters when it comes to durability. It's how does that foam hold up? Because that's really what a running shoes is doing. Anything that's doing for you or with you or whatever is coming from the foam compounds, not just the rubber on the outside. But
good specification with it. So well, hey, this has been a great conversation here. I appreciate your time coming on here. I feel like there's still a lot, and maybe we can get you back on and get an update on some of your scholarly work and what you're researching and what you're doing there in future episodes. Maybe we can follow along. But if people do want to follow you along, right, where's the best place? Like there's the podcast we've mentioned, but are there other places that people can follow you?
Yeah, good question. I think for runners, probably the most helpful resources are going to be doctorsofrunning.com. We have all of our like shoe reviews are there, and that's what's most prevalent. But you can also, we have like guide to running shoes for new runners. We talk about what does stability, quote unquote, stability really mean. So we have some articles across the top of the website that are pretty helpful, especially if you're trying to figure out what do all these terms and stuff mean when it comes to footwear. But yeah, the podcast is around. That's where we kind of expand beyond the running shoe world a little bit and get to really branch into our actual bread and butter, which is the other 98% of running outside of shoes.
Yeah.
So those are good spots. And if you're thinking about like run coaching and stuff, Pinery's Running Lab is the handle on like Instagram, and we're not super active on there. We're just kind of busy. So we're busy doing the thing and not so much like putting out a ton of social content, but sometimes we put up whatever workouts we're doing on there, but it'd be a good way to reach out to.
Like what you hear?
From, like,
leave a review of the show wherever you listen, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss an episode. RunDNA helps runners and running specialists through education and technology to identify each runner's unique injury profile to avoid setbacks and maximize results. The RunDNA podcast is produced by Ace Running LLC. The RunDNA podcast is intended for educational purposes only. No clinical decision-making should be based solely on one source. While care is taken to ensure accuracy, factual errors can occur. Always seek the guidance of qualified medical professionals before making healthcare decisions. Find us online at RunDNA.com.
Lots of different events there. So thanks for listening, and happy, healthy running.